be at your house shortly. Doors unlocked, lights are on.
All right.
Tell Nick where I'm at if he's up there already.
I'm here.
The other Nick.
Oh.
He was not. He was not. Okay.
Are you on?
Yeah, it should be. I just went on.
Maybe I'm not on the right thing.
No, you're on the...
So we just did the whole...
Started 9 seconds ago. Oh.
Sometimes it takes a second to catch up.
Yeah, that's why we give it a little minute, get everything caught up, make sure it works.
Oh, there we go.
Is it working?
It's working.
Yeah.
I'm the first to like it.
Can you hear us? Turn up the volume a little bit.
Why don't I see it?
Okay, good. Excellent. Oh, that might be the service. There's no telling.
Oh, I just got my notification that...
Yeah, see? Now we got the notification.
Honestly, that sounds a whole...
Ah!
Oh, yeah, it should.
There we are.
You watching yourself on camera?
It's kind of blurry.
It is.
Why?
I don't know.
Well, fix it.
Probably because of the internet, you know?
I need to zoom in anyway.
There we go.
Zoom in or just come in?
Ah! I'm not coming, but I'm breathing awfully hard.
Oh, easy.
Oh, yeah. This is a kid show.
Yeah, not really.
Still kind of blurry. Bruh.
Let's turn on.
What kind of Cricket wireless shit do you have?
All right, well, I connected to the Wi-Fi. We'll see if it gets any better. All right, good morning, everybody. We're just getting some technical things handled. We're going to make sure that we got a decent signal and that the sound is working correctly.
Is it blurry on your end, Nate?
No, it's actually looking better.
Let me see yours. Because my phone, it could be mine. Oh, his looks fine. Okay. Yeah, so it must be my phone.
Yeah, it's yours.
Oh, you know what? It's my Cricket wireless.
Yeah, it's your Cricket wireless junk.
Yeah.
Worried about nothing.
Thank you for 5G. Sucks.
Yeah, it does. Well,
I hate 5G. All right.
all right. So
over there.
Welcome back to episode 4 of Gassed Up and Greasy with Nick and Dan.
I'm Nick.
I'm Dan.
Hey.
We also like to say thank you to Nate, aka the Fast Plumber. There he is. There's his thumb.
Yes.
He's back here helping us out today. So today we're going to be discussing wiring. A lot of people are nervous to jump in on their wiring, and they're scared, they're reluctant, they're worried they're going to burn their car down. Okay, you still could, but we're gonna try to give you some tips and tricks to show you some different things that may help out.
Yeah, wiring's not half as hard as people assume it is. A lot of it is knowing the basics, and connections are probably your most important thing, making good connections. So we're gonna go over that. And what do you want to get started with first, Dan?
Nick's gonna go over some basic tools that you should have in your arsenal before you get started.
All right, cool. So first things first, pretty sure a lot of you guys have tools similar to this of your own. So these are my favorite tool right here. Snap-on makes these. So they do have a wire strippers. These are a combination wire stripper and crimpers. So they have both. They make 2 different sizes. One's for smaller gauge wire, one's for bigger gauge. These are great to have. You do have your traditional regular crimpers that do both insulated and non-insulated connectors. Set of dikes, it's always good to have. These fancy things, these are automatic wire strippers. So we'll go over that. And then for doing such things as like weatherpak connectors, you do have these fancy,
You gotta click them.
oh, is that, yeah.
They're ratcheting.
There you go, yeah. So they have the fancy little, I don't know what you call that, where it kind of like dimps it in the middle. Proper terminology there? Yeah, sure.
Connector dimples.
Yeah, connector dimples. But they do make different dies that you can put in as well. I actually have a few sets of these. They're pretty much the same thing. They're just smaller and they're not as wide as these. I like using these for regular non-insulated connectors. They do the same thing. They give it a little dimple as well. And these are pretty much the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. What else do we have? So a good little tool for doing heat shrink and such is a little tiny butane torch. Puts out a little flame. You can turn it up, down. This thing works fantastic. I like using this or a heat gun. We'll go over heat shrink as well. Another great tool by Milwaukee. It's the 12-volt battery-operated soldering iron. This thing is amazing. So it comes with two different tips. This, we have the pointed tip on there, and it also comes with the flat chisel tip. Do you have that? Somewhere. But super easy to do. You unscrew the collet, pull the tip out. Easy peasy. But this thing heats up super quick. I mean, it literally takes like 20 seconds for it to heat up. Turn it on. It's got a light. You can just let it sit there. Oh, there you go. There's the little chisel tip. I keep that one on mine. It's a preference. And then these do have a warning light too when you turn them off. I always have trouble turning these things off though. There we go. Okay. So you can see it's still blinking red, letting you know that it's hot. And if I were to touch this now, it's already hot. Another good thing, messing with electrical, is a test light. So going over circuits and stuff, if you want to test just for power to make sure it's there, check fuses, this is a really great tool to have. They do make other versions that have a voltage readout as well. Those are pretty fancy.
That one.
This does?
Yep, it's got a digital screen on it.
Oh, it does. Okay, yeah. Because a lot of times a test light, you might have power, but you might not have the right power.
Correct.
So that's why you have your meters. As you can see here, we got like 18 different meters. I'm gonna pull out this one because I have this exact same one and I'm familiar with it. Snap-on. These actually aren't that expensive considering for a meter.
Like $600.
Well, mine was only like 300. So I don't know.
Maybe the Bluetooth ones are $600.
Yeah, the Bluetooth ones are like 600, but these are like 300. A good fluke meter is gonna cost you about the same.
And honestly, if you go to your local Lowe's or Home Depot, they have these meters that are about $30, and for doing average wiring, this is just
But they don't have a color LED readout screen.
Correct.
Which is fancy. That's why I like it, because, you know, I'm getting old and blind, so the big numbers make it easy to see.
Absolutely.
And that's really, nope. So we got a couple little more things. Anytime you're doing wiring, have a wiring screwdriver handy. Some people call it a little tweaker. And also these little tools, so these things are a lifesaver. These are for doing connectors to unclip them. So I'm gonna go over that as well. We're gonna take like one of these plugs off and show you how to properly unclip the barrels out of them so you can pull the wires out, unpin them. But these little tools, I got these off like Amazon or something. They're super thin, tiny little things, but they're hardened. So you don't break it or anything. You can kind of pry on them pretty good. I've tried in the past taking a screwdriver and grinding it down to make it, but these are soft tips. So as you're trying to pry, it just bends. So that's why these little tools are fantastic. They're like $5 a piece, but definitely recommend getting these. All right, so next, I believe Dan is going to go over some of your symbols for wiring.
So before you get your wiring started, you need to understand what you're looking at. You need to understand maybe if you're going by a wiring schematic or instructions in a wiring harness, what the different symbol means. So while this looks like some kindergarten crap right here, this symbol here has a couple lines and a dot below it. That's usually your symbol for ground. And usually for positive, it's just a plus sign. Pretty easy. Nothing really crazy about that.
Like on a battery?
Yeah. You're not going to really be getting into diodes and resistors and stuff too much. That more comes into computerized things. But your basic automotive wiring, knowing where your grounds are is very important. Knowing where your positive or your hot wires are is also very important. Also, when they're discussing the wire colors, you may see it labeled as purple/white. What that means is the first color is your primary wire color. Like this wire is black. So this would be black, and then if it said black/white, that means black with a white stripe. So again, it's not real complicated, but it's something that's gonna help you along the way when you're going on with your project. The next thing we're gonna discuss is how to identify your wire diameter. Now, those of you that have dealt with maybe sheet metal before, things like that, they list it in gauges. With wiring, the smaller the number, the larger diameter the wire is. So a 2-gauge wire will be larger than a 10-gauge wire. And that's important when it comes to hooking things up, like your alternator, for instance. If you were to try to take one of these small 14, 16 gauge wires and run this as the main power wire on your alternator, you will have what we call a thermal event. And then you'll have less car because it'll be on fire. That's where the danger comes in, making sure that you're using the right wire in the appropriate place. In most cases, when you're going, yeah, there you go. That's something, what gauge is this wire?
4.
This is 4 gauge wire. This is typically what I use on alternators. You can get away with 8, but I like to use 4. It doesn't hurt to have a little bit bigger gauge wire on it. But you can see.
Most of the time it does say on there too, like that one says 4.
Yes. And you can see the difference in the wire size here is pretty ridiculous. So be careful with that. Also, your connectors, making sure you choose the right connector for the right job.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way because me and Nick are both very firm in this belief. So
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
so Scotch locks.
We hate them.
Some people call them quick connectors. It is a piece of plastic and you put 2 wires in it and you fold it over and pinch it and a metal blade pierces it. They are awful. They're absolute garbage. They allow for water intrusion and corrosion, which leads to bad connections. I've seen brand new trailers from facilities that have 30, 40 Scotch locks on them.
Yes.
We don't have any here because I throw them out if they breach this property.
So and a lot of times too with them, you go to squeeze it even with a pair of pliers and sometimes it doesn't even pierce the wire. It won't break through the insulation. So your connection never gets made. And then you're tracking it down, trying to figure out why you're not getting power to something. Just avoid Scotch locks. Throw them away. We're going to show you the right way to make connections.
So
CNC Fiend 55 asked, fire concerns aside, can the thickness of the wire affect the function?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. The thickness of the wire needs to be correct because you need to be able to make sure that it carries the correct load. So if you're, especially when it comes to computerized stuff, you guys are talking about data links and CAN buses, you really have to make sure you have the right wire. Now, when you're just talking about straight 12 volts, this 4 gauge cable is going to flow the same amount that a 8 gauge cable is. However, this is going to transfer it better and cleaner, and it's just going to overall perform better.
And one thing too, so you guys have messed with car audio, you'll know that the longer the run you have to make on your battery cable, the bigger your diameter wire will need to be. And the reason for that is because it's taken. So a good way to look at electricity is kind of like water flow. So a pipe. So the longer it is.
Are you just making this reference because there's plumbers here?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but no, that's what they teach you in electrical classes too, is to treat it like piping and flow of water. So the longer the run is, it's that much less, I guess, volume that can go. It takes longer, right?
You have a drop.
Right. So that's why you want to go to a bigger gauge to allow, I would say, more volume to get there. If that makes sense. I might not be articulating that very correctly, but you know.
Well, here's another way to explain it, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about amperage and
bigger
stuff a little
isn't
bit
always
later.
better.
Correct. Yeah.
Because you can run into issues where if you're running this on your computer wires, I mean, you're gonna have 50 of these tied up. You're gonna have a freaking hole this big.
Yeah.
You know, to go through your firewall.
So let's say that, for instance, this cable can handle 20 amps. But if you make this cable 40 feet long, it might only be able to handle 10 amps. You have to take that into account.
Yes.
Typically with a car, you don't have a long enough run to affect that. Now, if you're wiring a house or your shop or a very long vehicle, if you, let's say you have a limousine and you have the battery in the trunk, you're going to want to run a larger cable. It's going to save you some trouble down the road. So we're going to talk back about these connectors, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take the automatic wire strippers and we are going to strip off a piece of wire, and then I'm going to explain how to crimp one of those connectors on there and the benefits of them.
I'm gonna move the camera a little
Oh, are you going to come in?
Ooh, zoom in time.
Mobile now. So
Yeah.
these automatic wire strippers, you just
Those
lay your
things are
wire in
awesome.
there and that's it. You're not damaging the copper then. I like to twist my copper.
I do too. I'm a good guy. I like the copper twister.
He's a copper twister. So you're just going to slide it in until it seats, and then we're going to take our crimpers, and they're labeled bare and insulated. This is insulated. Just going to put it around it, give it a squeeze. So now that wire is in there, nice and secure and tight. But you see on the end here how you have this area around the wire. That's going to allow for moisture to come in, water intrusion, is the enemy because that creates corrosion. So then you just take your handy dandy torch and we'll see if we can actually capture it. It's heat shrink around it pretty much.
Oh yeah.
So see, now it's sealed up. That's going to keep water intrusion out, and that's going to allow for a cleaner, longer lasting connection.
And that's when we're using butt connectors, that's the only kind we use are heat shrink. Yeah, I mean, you might be in the interior of a car and don't necessarily need it, but why risk it, you know?
Absolutely.
And like Dan did too, where he pulled on it, I always do that. Because sometimes you might squeeze it and think it's good, and you're going to pull on it, it pulls right out. I mean,
and that's one way.
happens.
This is the best way to connect your wires. And honestly, I buy these connectors in bulk on Amazon and eBay. Be careful which ones you buy. There are some lesser quality ones. Unfortunately, all the pictures look the same, and it's kind of hard to tell in the pictures.
Yeah.
Once you find a brand that works, stick with it. We're also going to go over soldering a connection a little bit later, but for now, we're going to actually jump over to electrical tape and different types of loom, and then we're going to discuss different ways to secure your harness with P-clamps, things of that nature. So, Nick, if you want to go over loom
yeah,
and
absolutely.
tape.
So I'm going to start off here. So you can see we have, this is your standard split wiring loom, plastic stuff like they sell at your automotive parts stores. It's pretty common. I'm not the biggest fan of this. It's an appearance thing for me. What I like to use is the split braid. I think it gives it a little bit cleaner of a look, and this is also split as well. They do sell this in a non-split version that you have to feed the wire through, which can be a little aggravating when you have a harness already in the car of that sort. So I've made plenty of custom wiring harnesses for motorcycles, race cars, stuff like that. And in the motorsports industry, what they like to use is this stuff here. It's called Raychem. It's a chemical resistant heat shrink. It is not cheap at all. This stuff is stupid expensive. But you'll see a lot of motorsports wiring, they don't use loom at all. They strictly use the whole entire thing in this type of heat shrink because it is chemical resistant. For such as like a 1/4 inch here, I think it's like $6 a foot. So you can see that adds up very quickly. Yeah, that's why those wiring harnesses, to have them custom made is, you know, $3,000 to $4,000. Right? It's crazy. Yep. But if you're dealing with, you know, nitromethane or something like that, you know, or other harsh chemicals, you want to make sure it's not going to mess your wiring up if a leak or anything does happen. Electrical tape. Ooh, this is that non-friction tape?
Yep, well, they call it friction tape.
Or friction tape, yeah. So this stuff, it's like a cloth.
Like hockey stick tape.
Yeah, yeah. So this, again, you can use as well. You've used this sometimes, right?
I use that almost all the time.
Right.
I previously, in my previous life, I worked at a Freightliner dealership for 7 years.
You can wrap it.
We had to use that.
And they're abrasive resistant. You'll see sometimes wiring harnesses are covered completely in electrical tape. I'm personally not a big fan of that. I would rather use this friction tape because it is a lot stronger and it's a lot better if it's going to be rubbing against stuff and it won't be as prone to piercing. Electrical tape, I'm a big fan of the 3M. The cheaper electrical tapes tend not to stick as well or hold up. But such as like on the end of a connector here. So when we have our loom, I always tape up the end. This does a couple things. It makes it a little nicer and neater, but it also helps stop your loom from sliding down. You'll see a lot of them are like that as well. Oh, P-clamps.
Yeah, we're going to talk about securing your harnesses.
P-clamps. So some people call these Adele clamps.
Craig Prince is the only one who calls these Adele clamps.
I love you, Craig. But yeah, so as you're running these throughout the car, these things are great. You'll have to figure out which size you need. This is 3/8, which is actually perfect for this because that's 3/8 loom. Simply squeeze these together, and then you can screw it to the frame of your chassis or body or wherever you're going to mount it. And these will hold the wire securely. Zip ties are your friend as well. Do you have any of those? Oh, I do.
What?
Little zip tie pods.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Nick's going to go grab one of those. So, securing your harness is just as important as making your connections. If you're routing your harness and you're not securing it properly, it's gonna rub, it's gonna chafe, maybe get next to something that's too hot, and then you're gonna have failure in another one of those thermal events.
Yeah.
So Nick's got these cool tools right here, and it's an adhesive back.
So they sell these at
tie
Lowe's. They have different sizes. Again, we get them on Amazon, but they have a little sticky back. I've pulled the backing off. So, I mean, you stick them down. You see they're pretty anchored. And then we'll just take something like this. You can run a zip tie through it. And then that's a way too to secure, like if you don't have anything to screw into, it might not stick on the table the best because it's filthy. You should clean the surface first, but that gives you an idea. And then you can cut the tail off and it doesn't.
So you better cut that tail off.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look bad. So as far as if you got like something thin, like you're trying to stick it to, you don't really have, where you can run a screw through it, that's a good idea as well.
All right. The next thing Nick's gonna go over are grounds and ground cables.
I am?
Yeah.
Okay, ground cables. So you've probably seen these quite a bit. These are the braided ground straps. These will be seen on the engine, going from like engine to chassis ground, or this one in particular is for the battery. So this is actually for my Cobra back there. Where'd the other one go?
The little one?
Yeah, the little one. So you do have smaller ones too. So these are good. I like to use the smaller ones here for a body to chassis ground. You want to ground everything. I don't think there's anything such as too much ground.
Not really.
No.
Having a redundant ground as a backup is always a good thing.
Right.
Just on a typical vehicle, you're grounding the body to the frame, you're grounding the battery to the frame or the engine, and the engine needs to be grounded to the frame as well. Everything needs to be grounded to itself, and having extras helps. If you ever get in a case where you don't have enough grounds, electricity will make its own ground.
Yes, it will find it.
I worked on a car. It had a weak ground. Trying to start the starter was sluggish, turning over, and because the shifter cable was touching bare metal, it turned the shifter cable into the ground.
Yeah.
Electricity does amazing things, and bad grounds will give you all kinds of weird readings.
Yes.
And different cases where it seems like you have a gremlin in your harness. If you feel like you have a gremlin in your harness, check your grounds first.
Yeah, that's one of the first things I always do. And a proper ground, I wish I had something to show, but you want to make sure you clean it off completely. You can see like the bare spots here on the table. That's because we've used them as a ground for the welder. But you want to make sure there's no paint or anything. And this way, when you're bolting that down to your chassis, you have metal to metal contact and you don't have that paint in between because that can cause a bad ground. Another thing is when testing, such as like your meter, always use the negative side of the battery as your ground. It is the best ground you're going to find on that.
If you're having trouble, maybe your leads aren't long enough, they sell these kind of things right here. They have some that are on wire spools, or they have these flexible ones here. These are jumper wires. You can make your own, or you can buy some pre-made ones like I have here. But like Nick said, use your battery ground, or if you have a really solid frame ground that you know is good, jump your lead to it. Don't just make sure you have a clean ground. So important. So next we're going to talk about meter. While I'm doing that, Nick's going to prep to do some soldering.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get that started. So we're going to start with the test light first because it is the simplest thing to talk about. And I'm going to steal our handy dandy trailer battery. This is the best battery I've ever owned in my life.
It's almost ended up in a race car.
Several times, yeah. So with a test light, it's pretty self-explanatory. You have a clamp, most of the time that goes on your negative, and then you touch to your positive. Now this one being a little bit fancy test light, it'll give us our voltage reading.
12.4.
And red for power. Now, you can use test lights backwards. If you put it on the positive, then move over to the negative.
Are you positive?
This one actually shows up as green, but see how it has that minus sign in front? That's the ground. So if you're trying to see if something's grounded versus whether it has power, you hook it up backwards. You put it on your positive, and then you touch it to a ground. See, the battery's not grounded to the table, so it's not lighting up. But you touch your ground, it lights up. These are relatively inexpensive. This one is a little more expensive just because it's fancy. Ones with LEDs in them may give you false readings in certain cases. Honestly, the cheap $10 ones you buy at the parts store work just fine. One last warning about test lights. They have a very sharp tip on them. And that's for a reason, because they encourage you to poke wires, which you should not do. Do not poke and pierce the coating on the cable, because that will allow for intrusion.
From the back.
Exactly, and that's what these are right here. These are called back probes. So I'll use Nick's little fancy connector right here, actually. You can slide these in. I'm not piercing the wire, but it goes in and it touches the terminal inside. This is the best way to do it. If you're using a test light, do not pierce the wires. Now we're gonna go over the meters real quick. It's not gonna be anything crazy because all different meters have different types of functions, different purposes. I'm gonna set these to the side for a minute if you don't mind.
So Dan, I'm gonna test you. What's the first thing you always do with your meter?
Stick it in your mouth.
Exactly. No, test it to a known good source to ensure your meter is working properly.
Correct.
Use an outlet, a battery that you know is fully charged, whatever it takes.
When you're working on cars, some people may say, well, do I put it on AC or DC?
Oh.
Nate's gonna zoom in here on the face of this and we're gonna explain. This is a more expensive snap-on meter, but this has bigger screen and it's clear. So this first section right here, you see the V with the squiggly line. That means alternating. And this one is for direct current. DC is what we're gonna be using 90% of the time on vehicles when we're checking wiring. You'll see you'll touch your black lead to the ground and your red lead to the positive, and we get 12.7 volts. Well, it's jumping around a little bit, but.
Can you do it backwards?
You can.
Yes, you can.
You can. Again, the cheap meters work just fine. This meter, I favor this meter just because it has a nice bright screen and it has a lot of functions here. You can even check temperature with it. Some are designed to tap in so you can check RPM signal. But same thing, you have your AC/DC settings and resistance. So we're gonna go over resistance a little bit and explain that. If you don't know what resistance is, this may be a little confusing, but I'll try to break it down.
Break it down.
The best way.
Go to bed on time. Don't know what resistance is.
Yes.
Exactly. So when we were talking earlier about like water flow and electricity being very much like water flow, that all has to do with resistance. Now it's reading OL. That's an open circuit.
Over limit.
Yep. And you'll see if you touch something that is connected, you'll get the resistance reading. Our resistance reading on here, that is perfect, 0.0.
There you go.
What are you doing?
Turn the speaker on, so it'll beep.
Continuity.
Yep. Right.
Ohming it out.
Yep. Now, one thing to pay attention though, your meter has internal resistance. We have an internal resistance of 0.2 ohms, 0.1 ohms. So you need to take that into account when you're checking. But try not to have your fingers on both leads because your body has an internal resistance. Let me turn the function off for a second.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So it has a little bit in there. Try not to touch both ends.
But
Now,
that's pretty much it. I mean, you really don't have any with the fuse. I mean, very little.
Yeah. You're not going to be dealing with resistance too much and checking for resistance in your regular wiring. That's usually more on the diagnostic side when you're trying to figure out why your wiring's not working. And let's say a wire has 12 volts on it, but when you apply a headlight to it, it dies. Well, that usually means there's a flaw somewhere in the wiring, and that's where you would check resistance end of the wire, and it may come up with 10 ohms. That's probably too much. So you're gonna look for loose connections, bare wire, corrosion, things of that nature. Another thing you can check with meters is amperage. However, you can't check the amperage on your alternator with it. Most meters have a 10 amp fuse internal to them, and that's when you have to buy another device called an amp meter. This device is an amp clamp, and this will read much higher. So with this, you can actually check for your amp draw on your larger items like your alternator.
Yeah, because if you do that with a meter like this, because it's only rated for 10 or 20 amps, whatever it might be, it's going to blow the internal fuse. and then you're either gonna have to rip it apart or send it back to get repaired.
Yep. So remember, squiggly line is for houses, straight lines are for cars.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Also, that's a lot of the same properties when you go over and you're messing around with those. So we're gonna jump over, like I said, we're not gonna go deep into the meters. If you have more questions about the meters, let me know. I'd be more than happy to do
spend hours
a lengthy video on it.
And there's a lot of good YouTube videos already on that.
Yes.
So I definitely recommend checking that out.
Nick's gonna talk about soldering, which is my favorite way to do a connection.
Yeah, me too. I agree with that. So I've got just simple 2 wires cut here. I already pre-stripped them and pre-twisted the coppers. So we do have some rosin core solder. So one thing, and we forgot it, I am a huge fan of flux. Paste flux, liquid
What the flux?
Yes, exactly. I use it on everything. And if you've ever soldered before without flux, use it and you'll be surprised how much better things go.
Oh, it's a pain to do without flux.
Right. I put flux on the wire, and then also, ooh, do you have a rag anywhere?
Yeah, I got you.
Can you give me a damp towel?
Look, you're being a
So
little
when
demanding.
soldering, I like to always have a damp towel with me to clean off the tip, because you can see how since it's been turned on and heated up, it's kind of dirty and nasty. And when Dan comes back in a second, I'll show you.
With your nice Milwaukee soldering gun.
Yes,
Yeah.
this thing's
Milwaukee,
fantastic.
you wanna sponsor us, we can put your name.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely.
I always like to have a damp rag around, and you can see now the copper is all, the solder is all shiny from the tip. It's already pre-tint. So, first things first, I like to always melt a little bit on there, and I like to pre-tint my wires. That's just me personally. But just to where I get a little solder on there. I really don't like this tip, but we're gonna make it work. You can see there's some solder sucked up in there, helps get it started. Again, if you have flux, it would just suck it in easy. It makes it so much faster. I'm really not a fan of doing it without flux. But anywho, you get the idea. You don't always have to pre-tint them. I do sometimes, and other times I don't. See, without flux, it takes longer to get it because you got to heat up the wire and everything, blah, blah, blah. All right, so another thing. Yes, these are 2 open wires. We're going to pretend you have connectors on each side. Don't forget your heat shrink. You have to cover this up. Slide your heat shrink on first. How many times have you done that?
It's the same thing goes for when you're making brake lines and you forget to put the nut, cut it apart, do it again.
So what I like to do is roll the wires together like that. I take the ends and twist them together. This way you have a slight mechanical connection, but then you can take your solder, as it drips off. But this is gonna take forever with this tip because this tip's not meant for this. It's meant for more electrical boards. And it's gonna be a cold joint, but with flux, it makes it so much better. Why didn't we bring any?
I do it without flux and I don't have these problems.
Well, then you do it, because I can't do it without flux.
Oh no, you're doing just fine. You're doing a great job.
No, it's not even taking.
Do you want me to hold the wire for you?
Sure.
They got these really cool things when you're doing soldering, and it's like 2 alligator clips, and it holds your wire like this.
And you can do this too.
Yeah.
You can feed the solder into it.
Making sure your
There we go.
copper wire is warm, and you'll see it start sucking the solder in.
See how it's taking it in now? There you go.
If you have a really cold solder joint, it'll be more.
It'll be dull.
Yeah, dull, flat colored, and then you
You
have
want
a
to
good
be
solder joint.
shinier.
So, you want to do the heat shrinkage?
Yeah, the heat shrinkage. So if you slide your heat shrink on right away when it's hot, it'll go ahead and it'll pre-shrink your heat shrink, and sometimes can't get it on all the way. So it's always a good idea to let it cool down for a little bit. Just like doing the butt connectors, we're gonna take our little torch and just heat it up. I like to go from the middle and work my ways out so I don't get any air trapped in.
You can do this with a lighter as well.
Right, yeah. But you can see where it is now nice and tight to the wire. And now we have a properly soldered connection, and it is sealed with the heat shrink for moisture and some chemicals.
Yep.
Nice and tight. You never have to worry about it.
And heat shrink has Heat shrink and soldering the joints does have another benefit to it. When you're using butt connectors, let's say you have a harness that has 10 wires in it and you're trying to connect this harness. Somebody cut it in half when they pulled it out of the junkyard, who knows? If you have 10 butt connectors in a pile, you're gonna have it's gonna look like a snake that just ate. You're gonna have this nice wire and then this big swelled up part and come back down. It looks unprofessional and it puts stress on the wires. You can stagger your butt connectors a little bit, but honestly,
it still makes it
soldering and heat shrinking, it's going to be a nicer, cleaner connection, and a solder joint has less resistance than a butt connector joint. So if you're dealing with very delicate or intricate wiring, you're going to want to solder most of these joints instead of butt connecting them. As far as the tools and the equipment that we use today, it's all pretty standard stuff. I do want to show something that's a little non-standard.
One thing real quick, back onto the connectors. So they do have these. That's pretty much what's inside the middle of the butt connector. So these are, I don't know what they even call these.
Barrel connectors.
Barrel connectors. They're hard to find, honestly. I mean, you can get them on Amazon. But instead of, I don't know where that wire went with the solder. But you can do the same thing. You know, you would just kind of lay the wires together like that or twist them together, and then that would go over it and crimp it and then heat shrink over that as well. And then that's it's not as bulky as, you know, a bigger butt connector like that. So that is another option, but it's still gonna add size.
Another great option to help clean up your wiring harness is by using weatherpak or Deutsch connectors.
Deutsch?
Yes. So these weatherpaks are really nice. If you'll look at them, we have our male and female ends. They have a rubber seal on them, and they also have these rubber seals that go on the back side. So when these are connected and wired, one, you have a watertight joint. Two, let's say this is external wiring under the hood, and you want to be able to quickly disconnect your headlight wiring harness, your engine wiring harness. You can get these with 30, 40, 50, 60 connectors in them and make a big connector, and you can just disconnect it and have your engine out in no time.
Yep. So speaking of connectors, so this is one that's on a harness here. I'm going to show you how to unpin this properly. So you got to take this back clip off, whatever they call that, retaining clip or something. Oh, hold on. I had the electrical tape off and then we put it back on. I forgot. Yeah, untape so you can get your loom slid back.
You went and played yourself.
Yeah, I did. All right. So this way, we can get the loom out of the way. And then we can slide this back clip out. And like Dan was saying, you have those little rubber insulators back there that stop water from going in. So if you notice on the front here, there's that little like dip down on there. That is where you would put this tool in. So you can simply slide this tool in, and then you can take the wire and pull it out.
And we have not damaged the pin.
Nope.
It can be reinserted if you need to move it to a different location or alter it.
Or if you want to delete it, that's a good way to pulling it out without having just a little wire stubbed out. Now, if you'll notice, what we end up pressing on was this piece right here. And if you look from the side, you see how now it's flush? So what you have to do if you're going to reinsert it is just take this in there and pry it up a little bit. Because what there's a clip that'll come back here and it'll stop there to stop that from pulling out. So you have to make sure you press those back up, put it back in the same way, it'll clip, and then now it's tight, it won't pull out. But that's a great way to repin things or take wires out, etc. But
it's so easy.
Yeah.
Some connectors are not that easy.
Ones at your place the other day
right,
for the
there's
tank.
some that are a pain.
Yep.
But for the most part, like the weatherpak ones are like this as well.
Yep.
And there are the little barrel ones. They do take a little different tool. It looks.
I have that as well. Here,
yeah, it's like
talking.
a little
I'll be
round
right back.
circle, and you just simply press it down on there, and it squeezes the pins in so you can pull them out. Dan's going to get that now. But
I
yeah.
have my microphone on so you guys can still hear me.
Oh, well, we can't see him.
Is there a mute button here?
I don't know.
So
So we can mute Dan? Nobody wants to
I have
hear
a
him
mute
talking
button on.
more.
You guys can't
No.
mute me.
Actually, no. I'm going to talk about something else real quick. Oh, no, he's back. Never mind. Okay.
Guess who's back? Real quick. These are for your Deutsch Connectors. They're
Yes.
different barrel terminals. These are used. Take it out. This was on Amazon, 20 bucks. It's a great tool. This is another example of a connector like Nick was using, but look how many different pins are in here. And this one has a latch on it. This one was actually out of a box truck. But
yeah, and ones like that too, they usually have a like a guard on the front that you have to pop off in order to unpin them.
And that yellow pin right there is your lock.
Yep.
This actually locks the pins in, even though that thing barely moved, right? It just moves that little bit, that locks all these pins into place.
Right. So you can't unpin it accidentally with that locked in.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show this. So if you've ever messed with like a painless wiring harness, or does Quick Wire do this as well?
Yeah, Easy Wire, Quick Wire, Haywire, all of them.
So this is a harness off my Cobra back there. But I wanted to show this is a dash harness. So you'll see a lot of times these are labeled for you, makes it super nice, right turn, rear. So this way you're not having to figure out, oh, what's the red wire? Well, there you go. That goes to your low beam headlight. So it makes it really easy, all the painless. A lot of your aftermarket wiring companies now come like that, which is super helpful. I was gonna show you guys, but my little label maker broke. But I do have a heat shrink label maker, which is good because if you're, say, making a couple wires and you're, I guess, messing more with like a existing wiring harness and you want to label them, you can put on there like right rear tail light. And it looks all nice and pretty, but mine broke. And
if you don't have something to make labels, I've even got a $30 Bluetooth label maker that you sync to your phone. It works. It's not the nice heat shrink. And if you don't have either of those items, a piece of painter's tape and a marker will save your ass.
Yeah, a lot of times too, I'll make a chart where I'll put, like tags on it. Yeah. And this way later on, I can find them easy and I know how I did it. I'm just weird like that, but.
So,
anywho.
Quick overview about what
we mentioned dielectric grease.
Oh, we forgot.
Yes.
It's important.
When do you use this?
All the time.
All the time? But like in what application?
It's like Frank's red sauce. I put that shit on everything.
Yeah, so electrical connections, yes. It stops water and moisture from getting into your connectors.
Yes. However, if you go crazy and you put too much on it and in the right environment, it turns into this dry, crusty crap. And it looks like corrosion, but it's not.
Right. So for instance, you could take like a little bit here. We got a simple switch. You could put a little bit right on there. Then you would take your connector, slide it on. It does help to make a little better contact and also prevent it from corroding.
Corrosion.
I use it all the time on battery terminals and such.
So overall today, we started off, we talked about the basic tools that you'll need, some specialty tools that you don't really need.
But you're gonna want.
But again, some good things to crimp wires, strip wires, a test light, a meter. These back probe pins, this particular set is from Cornwell. We talked about these earlier and going into the back probes. But another thing you can use are T-pins or safety pins. They work just as well. You can slide them in the back and you can use that as your connector.
So also, if you need to, you can use a 12-volt Milwaukee battery as a power source to test things. Let's say you just want to make sure that light works. You simply pull it out, put it into your Milwaukee 12-volt battery, and now you know if your light works. Thanks, Milwaukee.
Yep.
Again, put your banner right there.
Yeah.
Right. We also discussed ground cables, different wire connectors, butt connectors, solder joints. We went over jumper leads, and then we went over the different meters and just making sure that you have everything in place to do a proper job. Well, the one last thing we want to discuss before we close this out is your battery lug cables. Now, this again is, I buy so much stuff on Amazon. It's a little ridiculous, but this is a great kit I purchased from Amazon. Comes with different battery lugs and the heat shrink for your battery cables. The heat shrink for your battery cables is a lot thicker, and the lugs are nice copper lugs. You can make your own battery cables. Like Nate, the gentleman who's holding the phone, he just moved his battery to his trunk not too long ago for his race car. So being able to fabricate your own cables is super helpful, especially if you need to make little short runs or unique grounds that need to go a certain path that maybe they don't have a pre-made one that works well. You can buy battery cable in bulk. You can make your own. It's not hard. Don't be scared of it.
And there's a special crimper for it. Or you can do the old hammer and chisel or punch trick as well.
I do.
That's what I do.
I use the ball peen hammer.
Right.
I stick
Just
the wire
flatten it
in the
out
lug
and
and
then solder
just
it.
whack and solder it.
So another thing too, this is just a little small one, but it's always a good idea to have yourself like a little box with miscellaneous electrical connectors in it. This way you're not having to scramble and look for stuff. It keeps it nice and organized. We have a cabinet here that we keep everything in. So this is an older, I don't even use this anymore, but I keep it for, you never know.
Yeah,
more or less.
It's a good thing to put in like your breakdown kit on your car.
Right, yeah.
You know,
It's good to have.
absolutely.
Yep.
So again, this was just a quick overview on some basics, tools that you'll need, things to make your job easier, and just understanding how certain things work. If you guys have any questions about this and want more specific information, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to answer those.
Yeah, I love doing electrical stuff. Most people hate it, but I love it.
And you know what?
It's challenging. It can be.
Yep. Patience is really important with it. And once you're good at it, you'll have a niche or niche, however you pronounce that. Niki? Nichi?
Niche?
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
And your friends will come running and ask you to wire their cars, and you charge them absurd amounts of money.
Yep.
Or you barter with them.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
What skill do they have that you can trade out with?
Exactly. That's how we get by.
Don't forget to comment on anything you would like us to do, any videos you would like to see, maybe some recommendations for what we should do next. We do like feedback, so please feel free to comment on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever he's got.
Oh, yeah. I'm popular
All
on
of it.
TikTok.
Yes.
My daughter thinks I'm famous. I'm only famous on this property.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely not.
You can find me on Facebook, Nick D'Alessandro, or at Restique Motorsports on Facebook, and you can find him.
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube.
Yeah,
It's all Greasy Boy Customs.
with a K.
And don't forget to go check out Nate, the Fast Plumber. He's on the Instagram and the YouTube, right?
Yep.
Both of them. He's putting up videos. He's got a sweet Mustang he's working on. Actually, they're putting some stuff on it today, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we'll put a roll cage in it.
Roll cage.
Which
Yep.
hopefully on our next episode, maybe in 2 weeks, we can get him to bring it down here and do a little preview of
Mustang Mania.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause that's really cool. And you
Can we
guys
do
need to
whole
see
shots in the street?
that. Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, we can have John bring his over.
Yes. Yeah. That actually, I'll talk with him.
We can do Pro Charger versus Supercharger.
We'll have a Mustang day because there's a lot of Mustang fans.
There is. In Central North Carolina, Mustangs are king, and that's really popular around here. And they're a popular platform, especially with the Coyote engines. So I think that'd be a
job with that engine. It can take a ton.
Oh yeah.
yeah. Maybe
It's-
we'll have a
yes.
Mustang Coyote day.
Yes.
We have 3 Coyote engines in here too. So.
We do. We do.
Anyway, thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah.
Coyote swapped the world, Craig.
Thank you guys for
Like shaking
joining.
your head, Nick.
And remember, 2 weeks, 10 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, we'll be doing a live show again. Gassed Up and Greasy with Nick and Dan. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Now you have to fill in the time while we stop it.
Oh no, I just like focusing on Nick while I'm trying to figure out how to end this. Stop.